to Masters of Creativity. It's so great to see all of you joining from all over the world. I'm always humbled and excited to see the gathering of learners that we've got here, and we have a special treat today. My friend and world-renowned guru, Alisa Cohn, is joining us today to talk about growing your leadership. Alisa is an executive coach who's worked with C-suite executives at prominent startups like Venmo, Etsy, DraftKings, and at Fortune 500 companies like Dell, Microsoft, Google, Pfizer, and the New York Times. That's all I had time for in one breath. She is the author of the exceptional book, which I have been reading and enjoying, called From Startup to Grown Up. And she's the host of a podcast of the same name. She was named a top startup coach in the world at the Thinkers 50 Marshall Goldsmith Global Coaches Awards, and the #1 global guru for startups in 2001 and 2002, because she's such a slacker. She's a sought-after speaker. She's keynoted for events at IBM, PwC, Dell, and Citi, and they have named Alisa one of the top 100 leadership speakers. Her articles have appeared in HBR, Forbes, and Inc., and she's been featured as an expert on Bloomberg, BBC World News, and in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. Please join me in welcoming Alisa to the stage. Welcome, Alisa.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. What a pleasure to be here. It's so great to be with all of you today.
And I've actually got Alisa here with me at the D-School. We're in adjoining rooms, trying to be acoustically separate, but I'm basically right behind her right now. I'm behind the whiteboard behind her. So it's a real treat to have her here at Stanford. She's going to join in our class a little bit later today as well and help some of our entrepreneurs in a Launchpad Accelerator. So we are delighted to have you here, Alisa. Alisa, before we dive into your stories, I know we want to hear some amazing stories from your renowned coaching practice. What I want to ask everyone to consider is right now, you've got one of the foremost life coaches and leadership coaches in the world live, available to interact with you. And I'd love for you to consider, as you think about leading yourself or leading others, what are questions you have? We want to invite 2 special guests onto the stage to do a one-on-one coaching session with Alisa during Masters of Creativity today. And so we're just going to be looking through the chat. So if you have a personal leadership challenge or a team leadership challenge, as you think about managing yourself or managing others, we'd love to give you the chance to have a one-on-one conversation with Alisa. So be thinking about that, and I'll prompt a couple times in the chat. But with that, Alisa, I thought maybe just as by way of illustration, if you wouldn't mind, let folks know some of the experiences that you've had and some of the ways that you've helped illuminate leaders' mindsets as they think about doing inner work in order to accomplish their outer objectives.
Well, I love the way you frame that, Jeremy. First of all, thank you so much for that really just lovely introduction. And I want to encourage and echo what Jeremy just said, is that if you have some challenges that you want to get some coaching on right here, right now, in front of 90 of your closest friends, I would love to be interactive with you and coach you live right here to help you get a sense, because I think it's a great question. Like, what do people typically, come to me for? This is like the little mystery about executive coaching. And I'll just say as a starting point that my book, From Startup to Grown Up, is divided into 3 sections, which relate to the things that people come to me about. So the 3 sections are managing yourself, the hardest person to lead every day, and then managing others, the people around you, and then managing the business. So I thought it would be helpful. People, really ask me all the time, like, what kinds of conversations do you have, and what kinds of things do you deal with people about? So I thought I would just share a couple of stories from my coaching practice to kind of figure out, to sort of showcase and share what the kinds of things we talk about. Now, of course, I've chosen dramatic stories, in order to also, help entice all of you. And I guess the first story that came to mind when Jeremy asked me to share a few stories is one very fast growing company that I worked with. I worked with a founder, and his name is Ken. And when I would meet with Ken was like super intense, amazing, positive, incredible leader. Everybody wanted to follow him, really like the archetype of an entrepreneur. And Ken had raised $50 million, about to close another large round. So there wasn't a question of Ken's ability to influence other people and get venture capitalists, not an easy crowd, to invest in him, to give him money. And yet what was interesting to me as we, continued down the road, and he really needed to get the right people, senior people, much more senior people. I will just sort of say as a sidebar, very often startups have to constantly turn over their executive team and constantly hire new people, more senior seasoned people who've done it before onto their executive team. And Ken was absolutely in that spot. But for some reason, he could never land senior executives. He could never hire them effectively. He could never close them effectively, be talking and talking. And somehow it would take him a long time to hire people. So at one point I overheard him on the phone, because he kept telling me, oh, wasn't the right person, or, oh, it didn't work out, or we can't find someone. But one time I overheard him on the phone, and I heard a very different Ken on the phone. He was sort of bland. He was sort of neutral. He was kind of beige, and it's not his usual state. So after that, I, debriefed with him, like, what happens when you land when you try to close these candidates? And he'd say, oh, well, I wasn't sure if it was the right fit, or I was distracted, or whatever. But that's coaching. Coaching is helping people get down below the surface and really say, what is really going on in your inner voice? And Ken finally got still, and he got quiet for a minute. And what he said to me was very quietly, I am afraid. I'm afraid that if I lure them out of their safe jobs, their safe corporate jobs, that, they'll come to our startup and to my little company. He still started as a little company, and we're not going to make it. We're going to fail. And I'm so concerned about taking someone out of their safe job and then not being able to deliver on the promise. And we talked about that quite a bit. And, we talked also about how do you counteract that feeling, right? So both that's we have to honor that that's a feeling that you have that's inside of you. That's kind of a version of imposter syndrome, which we'll talk about in a second. But also, what do you do with that feeling when you finally tell yourself the truth, which is, I'm afraid to lure them into this environment because I'm afraid that we're not going to make it, which is, just honestly, entrepreneurs always, showcase the confidence they have, but in the inside, there's a lot of self-doubt. So I asked him, well, what do you answer yourself, right? Why did you start this? And why do other people come here? And we both realized together, people know the risks when they're coming to a startup. People want the opportunity to build something and to work for him because he's such an amazing leader. And people know the risks, and they want the opportunities to be able to do a lot of different things that they're not able to do at large companies. So we got him to be able to come to terms with those feelings, that sort of inner voice. And suddenly, as if by magic, miraculously, he was suddenly able to entice and close a number of very amazing, excellent senior executives. The company went on to be super successful, had a very great acquisition. So it was really like to identify what is going on the inside. As actually, Jeremy, you said this in the beginning, what is going on the inside that's preventing you from executing on the outside? And I want to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome, because that is very, very, very common for entrepreneurs, for leaders of all stripes. And, people sometimes think, oh, women have imposter syndrome. No, men and women all together both have imposter syndrome. So one tool I want to give everybody right now is, when you are really tuning into your self-doubt, it's very helpful to be honest with yourself and tune in to what your voices are. I'm having self-doubt. Maybe I can't do it. Imposter syndrome really has to do with, they're going to find me out. They're going to realize that I'm an imposter, and they're going to take me out, and it's going to be embarrassing and humiliating. And also it's going to be some sort of failure. I want to encourage everybody in this session today to put together a highlight reel to figure out how to combat your own personal self-doubts, your fear, self-doubt, or imposter syndrome. And a highlight reel is a simple tool that's in my book, but you can use it right here. It's finding some time to write down 3 or 4 or 5 specific successes you had where you overcame obstacles. Bonus points for if you were able to overcome an obstacle that you didn't think you'd be able to overcome. And write them down, either on your computer or by hand on a pad, and have them with you. And that reminds you of your capabilities. It reminds you of how amazing you are. It reminds you that even when you've had challenges in the past, you've been able to overcome them. And that will help remind you who you are in the moment that you're feeling imposter syndrome. So again, 2 ways to use this tool. Once you write down all your stories, you can just read it first thing in the morning. By the way, mornings can be hard, and you could be facing a difficult day ahead. And there's nothing wrong with encouraging yourself by reading positive stories about yourself. The second time is that when you are in a place of like concern and self-doubt and imposter syndrome, you're feeling it right now, then you can take your highlight reel and remind yourself of your capabilities. So that's story number one. Jeremy, I'm wondering what you think about that.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And imposter syndrome, I felt was a big theme in your book. And so if folks are resonating with that as a challenge, I would highly recommend From Startup to Grown Up, because Alisa speaks so eloquently about the reality and the tension and the struggle, but also practical tools like the highlight, which I love, the highlight reel. I wanted to go back to Ken. Is that what you said his name was? Is that right? Yeah. So I wanted to ask about Ken. And I think that we can really identify with his challenge of not wanting to lure an executive away. How did you shift his perception of the value prop? What was the process by which he came to, because you just rattled off a bunch of amazing benefits for somebody, but walk us through the process of how did he start to articulate those or realize those things? Did you talk to people that he had hired? How do you go from having that negative script, so to speak, to the lines for a really positive, affirming sales pitch?
Yeah, that's really a great question, Jeremy. And first of all, I just want to say, again, in the world of coaching, what we do is conversation. There's no Excel spreadsheets. There's no ditch digging. All we do is talk in coaching. So to your point, what we first did, and also I think what I help my clients do is create safe space to reflect. So with Ken, as we talked, I really helped him see that was his organizing principle. That was his internal assumption. I don't want to take away these people from their safe jobs. Those poor people and their safe jobs, and we fail. There's two things to look at there. To your point, the value prop. And the second is, are we going to fail? Right? So it's really difficult to overcome the challenges of your startup when you have this meme in your head, the music in your head, which is, we're probably going to fail. We might fail. There's going to be an issue around failure. So one thing to say is that I really helped him reframe all of that, which is, if we put one foot in front of the other, we have a lot of chance of success. And even though there's a lot of ways to fail, which is true, there's actually a lot of ways to be successful, and you don't have to get everything right to be successful. So he was able to counteract that kind of dread inside of him just by reframing that sort of music in his head and adding extra sentences, which are, we might fail, but also we might not. So one foot in front of the other will get us there. But then the other part around the executives, what we did was we really just got in tune with, I don't want to take them out of their safe jobs. So then, I asked him basically some questions about, well, tell me about these different people that you've been trying to recruit, or even some people who are already on your team. Tell me about, what they're thinking they're joining. And what he said was obvious. They think they're joining a high growth, high possibility startup. They think they're joining a great culture. They think they're joining a place where there's a lot of opportunity to grow. And they think they're joining a place where they're going to get new skills and be able to manage people and do a whole bunch of different things. Absolutely. So what I asked him to think about was, why is he making the choice for them about not joining, like that great opportunity and the great culture and the great, sort of environment that he's building and the company is building, and putting into the very narrow scope of what will happen if we fail and they were taken away from their safe jobs. The other thing I helped him think about was the notion of a backup plan. In general, many employees, right, cycle through different, like most employees find different opportunities throughout their careers. They don't stay at one company, and they might get laid off, they might get fired, or they might move on. So even if the company did fail, which is possible, what was going to happen to them? Honestly, they'd find new jobs. That's what happens to people. They find new jobs. So I helped him kind of neutralize just by talking it through, just by literally asking questions like, okay, so what's going to happen if the worst does happen? And also, what are the things that you are offering them, even if a few years from now you're out of business? And he was able to articulate those things. But actually, Jeremy, your idea is a very good one. Like, good, go ask. I think that's a great idea. Go ask the other executives, why did you join? And what do you love about working here? And what is the opportunity? And that's going to help remind you of what is actually there for the executives.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I think that there's it's easy to see the risks and neglect the opportunity, and reframing to what's the opportunity you're providing people, not just what's the risk you're inviting them to take on. You're interacting with adults who are going to make well-informed decisions, but appreciating the opportunity as well. And by the way, it's not like working at a large organization is a riskless endeavor, that large organizations don't fail or that people don't get fired. So even the paradigm that perhaps it's safer there, I would argue, is probably a false notion as well. So it's pretty amazing to see you work through that. So what's the I want to hear another example. I know you've got a handful more there. And by the way, there's several questions coming on the chat. So we'll definitely get to Q&A by the end. But I want to hear another example of a transformative moment with one from your coaching practice.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy. So another, I guess, transformative moment is when somebody called me kind of in a panic, like, can we meet today? And I'm thinking, actually, no, but okay, we can find time this week. So this founder's name is Scott. And Scott was obviously, a lot of the founders I work with, and a lot of founders and entrepreneurs in general, they're intense and they want things to happen now and they're impatient. So I get that. And also he had a lot of energy and a lot of positivity. So I go down to downtown, it was in New York, and I meet with Scott, and we take a walk around Washington Square Park. And he's telling me this story. He's saying, we're 5 years in, I think things are going well. I'm trying to hire all these people. I got a whole bunch of, I've said, who are the employees that you've hired? He said, well, a bunch of them are, friends of mine from college and from other experiences. And he was telling me about the team and about what he wanted to get done, and also about concern that people weren't meeting their goals and weren't working hard enough. And it all came out kind of in a tumble. But as we're walking, I found out the real reason that we had to meet, which is this. His team, especially his friends from the past, and another member of the core team, like 8 of them, had sort of said to him, let's go get an iced coffee. So they went around the corner to one of the fast food chains, and they sat down and they all got an iced coffee and sat down, and they started laying into him. They started telling him, everyone's going to quit, and this is a disaster, and everyone's upset with you, and you're being too harsh with everybody, you're being too critical, for like an hour. They just like beat up on him, and he was a wet puddle. It was so hard for him. We called this the iced coffee intervention, as the years went by. So they took him in for the iced coffee intervention, and that's what he came out of that. And he called me right there and then, and he got my name from some VC in New York. And so as we walked, I was asking him more and more about that. And he started crying because it was so much stress. He's so high strung as a person. And he, sort of is telling me about the iced coffee intervention. He told me about his fears. Maybe everybody will quit. Maybe we're not doing well. Maybe I'm the problem and I don't know how to manage people. And in the meantime, no one's meeting their goals. Like, I'm frustrated and upset because nobody's meeting their goals and it's a free-for-all. So that was a lot, as you can imagine. So what I did was what I do for many of the leaders that I work with. And certainly in this case, I did it. I conducted 360 feedback. 360 is the degrees of a circle. And what that means is I talk to folks up, down, and across of the person I'm dealing with. In this case, the founder. I talked to the board. I talked to this core group of people who had been part of the intervention. And I talked to Scott's co-founder and a few other people. So I talked to all these folks around him. And what we found out was this. We found out that, my impression of Scott is this like positive energy and intensity, and he'll do anything for the company. And he worked, 15 hours a day, an intense work ethic, and always is about the company. That was amazing. And that when you got Scott in the right time, he would really be helpful. He knew a lot about the product they were building. He knew, of course, a lot about what he wanted, and he was very helpful. But the other side of that was not so great. The other side was that he was highly critical. He could be snippy and snappy and even explode at you if you weren't doing the right thing. And when you came to him to ask for questions and he was in the wrong mood, which was most of the time, he would grill you and interrogate you. And it would not feel like he was going to help you. He was not going to sit down next to you and help you think your way. Say, did you think about this? Do you think about this? Do you think about this? And people would emerge feeling dumber, not smarter, which is not good in a leader. So took us about 8 months to really help him get on path. And, Jeremy, you asked me earlier, like, so what do you do? And I'm going to sort of share first, what I do is I debrief on the 360 feedback, which is, here's the good news. Yay. Here's the difficult news. So, like, let's deal with it. Most people, their first reaction is defensiveness. It's not true. And also it's their fault, which may all be true, but perception is reality in this case. So we have to deal with kind of, this is how they perceive you. And then I helped him one by one figure out what's going to make him feel safe. Because when you're lashing out at people, when you're exploding, when you're having, this reaction and being overly critical, there's a reason. It's because you're being overly critical in your head, which we got him in sort of in touch with. And also he just didn't know how to get his arms around the business. So I helped him create a dashboard of the key metrics. And I helped him communicate to his team as in, like, this is what I'm expecting you to do. But it can't be, this is what I'm expecting you to do. You've got to do it. I'm so frustrated. It's got to be, here's what you need to do. Let me know if you have questions. Let me know if I can help you. And here's what I'm expecting. And so then people can show if they can meet the goals, which some could, and if they could not meet the goals, which some could not. And so he could be much more even keeled, knowing what was going on, and deal with individuals who were not meeting the goals as needed. So to be honest with you, even though some of those core group did not meet their goals and ultimately had to be managed out of the business, everybody was much happier with the environment because they all knew what to expect. And he was calmer and not exploding at various sort of inopportune times.
Okay, so I've got to know, does it require iced coffee intervention? Because to me, it feels like that. Sandy's resonating, right? It feels like that's things went awfully far off the rails. Is there a way to do preventative work, or does it only have to be reactionary?
Oh my God, thank you for asking that question. I literally was on a call on Monday with a board member for a CEO who said, I'm so frustrated. He's not doing this and he's not doing that. And as I, calmed him down and walked him through, what we're doing, what we're talking about, he's like, we don't have 6 months. And, he knew there was an issue in October of last year, but he waited a long time to thinking, oh, I'm sure it'll fix itself, or I'm sure it will, somehow resolve itself, or I've given him a little hint. So it's really helpful not to be called at the moment of the iced coffee intervention, right? It's really helpful to do some of this work beforehand. So many founders reach out to me because they say, I'm a first-time founder. I've never managed a team this big before, and I don't know what I don't know. I think everybody on this call can recognize you don't know what you don't know. And I think it's always good practice to find mentors and coaches and peer coaches and peer advisory boards, personal advisory boards, and people around you to help you prevent problems before they get too big. The second thing is that everybody, and if you think about Scott and everybody, you are the expert on your intention, but everybody around you is the expert on your impact. So everybody could upgrade their leadership and even just like their personal kind of the way they do their life by figuring out if their intention is aligned with their impact. And so just doing that, and by the way, you can certainly hire a coach to do 360 feedback for you, but you can also do this one exercise that I talked about in the Tim Ferriss show, and I said also in my book. It's called the 3-word exercise. So here it is, 3 words. You can ask anybody you want to. You can do this in your personal life. You can do this in your professional life. You can do it anywhere you want. You can say, what are the 3 words that come to mind when you think about me? And I like to emphasize, when you think about me, what are the 3 words that come to mind when you think about me? Just to really frame it for them. And then people will share the 3 words that come to mind. Now, of course, if you don't contextualize it, it's just weird. Like an email out of the blue, hi, what are the 3 words? That's weird. So everybody on this call can say, I heard a coach talk today and she gave me this great activity and I'm going to do it with you right now. I'm looking to see how I come across. So I'm asking a number of people to just answer this question. When you think about me, what are the 3 words that come to mind when you think about me? And then they can email you back, or you can do it on the phone, however you want to do it. By the way, they may come back to you and say, that's a great question. What are the 3 words that come to mind when you think about me? So that kind of also opens up a dialogue with your friends and your colleagues. But nonetheless, you get a whole bunch of information. I did this actually with one client. I did sort of quick and dirty. She said, one client said she said she was very strategic. She's this leader in this divisional president. And she said, I'm very strategic. Everyone knows that. I said, oh yeah. So we did a quick 3-word exercise. And what came back was that she's detail oriented, that she's critical, and that she is thoughtful. Those are good things. I'm not saying that's not good things. And, critical, that's kind of interesting, but it felt like very tactical actually. But she told me she was strategic. So that's like really interesting. What is it about her inside that is like thinking I am strategic, but everybody else is seeing that she's more detail oriented? So like, that's a very helpful sort of exercise for all of you to do. But just to come back to your question again, Jeremy, I would just say this. Everybody can have a peer around them or somebody around them to help tell them, I think you might be running into trouble here, or you might want to rethink the way you're doing this. And you can build situational awareness yourself, but you can have people around you that you give full permission to give you a sense of maybe there are some issues. So nobody takes you out for an iced coffee intervention.
That's great. That's great. No, I love how practical these tools are. You can tell how riveted I am because the automatic lights have gone off in my room because I'm so focused. So that's excellent. Alyssa, I'm gonna call an audible here. We've got so many great questions. I want to kind of shift, if you don't mind, and if we have time, we can come back to. I know that you have more stories prepared. There's just some. I thought this was a really wonderful question from Johnny. And I'd be curious to know, maybe Johnny, if you're able, if you can, do you mind if I spotlight you as well?
Happy to. Yep. Go for it.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Johnny. Okay, so here's Johnny's question, Alyssa, if you haven't seen it. He said, when the leader, me, has been the daily heart of a high functioning startup of 5 employees that needs to scale up into something less startup-y and less attractive to the leader, how does the leader back off of daily operations without demotivating the team?
Oh, I know. That's a good question. Johnny, do you want to give a little more detail about that?
This is something I started 3 years ago and it's finally working. I now have 2 young kids. My health has suffered, from just being super busy with this and super busy with the kids. I haven't been taking any time to, even think clearly, let alone take care of myself. And so now, and the team is great. I've got these brilliant young people who can really do stuff without me. But if I start, taking mornings off to run and, do yoga, or even, I'm not really I'm high on the creativity spectrum, but I'm not a daily task person. So I'm a very much a startup person, but I don't work well in established companies because I want to do something other than what the company's doing. I don't want to do the thing that's already proven. It's not interesting to me. So now we're at the stage where what we're doing is getting proven, and I need to, back off a little, take care of my health, or, even do things within this that are more experimental and less concerned in the daily operations. And I've got this brilliant young team, and I don't want them to start flaking off if I start flaking off.
Oh yeah, I get it. So it sounds like everything is working well. It's not a question. Do you have someone who's kind of running the OKRs and the processes and that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay. So your concern is about just keeping them motivated.
That's it.
Okay. Amazing. And so how many employees do you have?
5 to 9, depending on how you count, plus okay. Overseas devs.
Okay, great. So I guess I'm going to ask you a question. When you think about your relationship with them, how easy is it for you? Because you've got a very small team. So actually having one-on-ones with these members of the team is actually very doable for you. I'm wondering if you could think about yourself and you're having a one-on-one with your various team members. And of course, ultimately you'd have more, all hands and group meetings. But if you have a one-on-one and you want to both express 2 things, both that you're going to step away to do other kinds of things and obviously focus on your health, and also maybe even think about new ideas for the business. And that also you want them to even more double down, even get more intensely focused on what we're building so we can all win together. What kind of phrases what kind of like essence would come to mind if you thought about that as the goal for a one-on-one with each person?
You know, my feeling thus far is that if I try to do that, people start thinking, oh, well, I want to go spend more time with my family, so if you're going to do, oh, I want to travel more, and it's like, in a sense, fair enough. And it's been very tight and friendly thus far. So it feels very egalitarian in a way. There's a lot of mutual respect. So it's it feels to me like it would be kind of like, oh, interesting. Like, my concern is that people would feel that I was abandoning, or that I was, putting myself up above, or yeah, flaking off, or whatever.
So it sounds
And
like
I've
that's an
tried.
assumption. Oh, sorry, go
Well,
ahead.
I've started trying to take, a day or two, from home per week, and then I'm getting others saying, well, what if I took Fridays off, and it's like, it's not really the plan. Yeah.
I get it. So it sounds like you just kind of, sort of snuck in a day from home without telling anyone. And I'm wondering if you've, what I'm asking you to think about is if you had a one-on-one and you could test this, you don't have to do this with everybody. You could test this, to have a conversation with folks who are like, listen, let me tell you what's going on, right? What's going on is I need to focus on my health a little bit, which you may or may not say. But another thing which is also accurate is I need to really have some time and space to go think about other creative ideas for our business. And therefore, you're going to see me a little less often. And at the same time, I want to make sure that you feel fully enabled and fully motivated and clear on your goals so that you're able to do all the things you need to do just the same way you've been. And of course, I want to continue to have open communication. Something like that. What about that as an approach, just as a test to see how that will land with one of your folks?
I will very happily give it a shot. And we can cut this whenever you're ready, Jeremy. I suppose my concern would be, like, that's a very attractive position. I'm the guy who goes on trail runs and takes long showers and thinks up ideas. Like, everybody might be like, well, I want to do that too. Like, how come you get to do that? And that's again where that, that division could happen. It's like, well, because I invented this one and that's where it came from. So, you stay here, Grant, and I'm gonna go, do the other thing. So that's my concern, but I can certainly try it.
I totally get that you're concerned. And I would ask you to test your concerns, because I'm even interested in the assumptions you have in your head. Like, everyone wants to be like a founder. Maybe not. A lot of people actually want to get their work done, know they're achieving their goals, know they're making a difference, and understand how their work matters to the greater good. They also want great managers to help guide them and help them with their career development. I understand that you don't want that, but the people who you've employed are not founders. By definition, they may be future founders. But they're not founders. So you might want to just rethink. I really want to encourage you to test as an experiment. And I'd love to hear back from you what you find out.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I will. I'll reach out. Thank you.
Johnny, thanks for being willing to share with us. I mean, it's incredibly vulnerable and brave. So thank you for that. And I love a couple of things I just want to call out from what Alisa said. One is you can prototype it, right? You don't have to make some huge proclamation. You can actually kind of have a little bit more of a, and free. I like that too. Yeah. You can develop your approach, right? And the other thing is recognizing, and this is huge, and it's something I would actually say I experienced as I was reading this, is a lot of this I'm reading, I go, it's not for me. I'm not the target user, right? And it's probably hard for you to imagine someone who doesn't want to spend Fridays thinking about the next thing. But Alisa's point is spot on. There, a lot of times the reason people come to work for you is because they actually want to do their job and they want to be led, and they don't want the Friday off necessarily in the same way that you do, right? And it's not a Friday off for you, by the way. It's a Friday working differently, right? And that to me is a key distinction. And I would just, one thing I wanted to add is work looks different for different people, and productive work for you may mean taking a walk. It may, I mean, you're using examples that seem trivial, but they're actually fundamental. It's important to create space for synthesis. Many of the most high functioning leaders I know regularly block a day. Jeff Bezos in the early days of Amazon had 2 totally unscheduled days per week, completely unscheduled. Guaranteed nobody else in the company did, right? But he's the CEO and he has to be able to think of the future. And if you don't create that space for yourself, nobody else is going to. So I hope that was helpful. I want to turn now. There's another great question. Neha, I don't know. Are you able to turn on your video? I messaged you privately.
I am on
there you
video.
are.
Yeah.
Hey, great. Thanks so much. And if you don't mind, I'll read your question here. Alisa, I don't know if you've been able to see it. I don't assume you're able to read chat. So Neha said, when things are moving so quickly at a startup.
Sorry, my name's Neha, not Neha.
Sorry, Neha. I apologize. Thank you.
No worries.
So here's what Neha said. When things are moving so quickly at a startup, how do you manage yourself and your direct reports when they're making mistakes?
I know. Neha, right?
Neha.
Okay. Neha, I know. Wow. So first of all, I think it's helpful for you to think, first of all, mistakes will get made. I think it's just very helpful to also first and foremost accept when things are moving fast. For a startup, especially, that's good, not bad. When you're kind of like, you're getting into it, you got product market fit, or you're getting there and you're kind of like laying the tracks ahead of the train, that's an intense time and mistakes will get made. So I think what's super helpful is to first of all figure out what are the must wins, what are mistakes unacceptable, and really talk with each of your leaders to figure out what is the threshold for mistakes. Now, what's the business you're in? What's your business?
FinTech, we're a savings app.
Yeah, so that's a great example because I'm just going to sort of make this up, but like possibly marketing has some tolerance for mistakes, like they misspelled this whole thing. I can't believe it. It's so embarrassing. As compared to there was fraud and a number of your users got stolen from, right? So those are 2 different kinds of mistakes. So you might want to really look at your core functions and have a deep conversation with, here's what's necessary. Here are the must wins. Here's where mistakes cannot get made. How do we have a process is the second thing, a mechanism, a process, a system to ensure that we don't make mistakes, and also that we have an early warning system. We catch when mistakes are about to get made in these particular core functions. They must win. There are no excuses. Everything else, we do the best we can. Now, it's like helpful to set up as many systems as you can. Startups don't like systems. I know that. By the way, stupid systems, no one likes stupid systems, right? And unfortunately, when systems get kind of kludged together, it's like, this is so dumb. Why are we doing it this way? So it's also helpful to guide your team to rethink the systems you already have to see if they're working efficiently, because systems does not mean slow. Systems usually can mean fast if they're activated correctly to prevent mistakes in general, but really keeping an eye on the core functions. Does that help, or do you have questions?
Yes, no, that's really, it's helpful to, it's probably good to also just all get on the same page in terms of what are the expectations for that function. But I like that it's focused on the leeway. What are things we can just do the best that we can? Mistakes will happen versus what are the areas we really have to double, triple check what we're doing.
Yeah. And how many executives, how big is your company total employees?
We're 30 now. And so that's part of it. It's just, we've doubled in the last year or so. So it's all of a sudden, instead of it being all in my head, I'm like, who's doing what, where? It's now having to rely on a whole team of senior management, right? And so then when you're relying on others, you assume they've got it. They're double checking or whatever that needs to happen. And then if they're making mistakes too, then, it's sort of like what Johnny was just saying. It's like, you feel like you have to get back in maybe, and like, but you don't, like, you can't really do that every time. I mean, there's just no way to scale if you're having to jump in every time a mistake has been made, so
totally.
That's part of the other half of that.
Yeah, totally. Because when you said that, and then you said, that reminds me, I also need to, and I'm thinking, yes, I was positive that was true too. It's always very helpful to have step aside, pull aside and have a full day offsite, a 3-hour offsite, whatever it is, and talk to all the leaders and really say, hey, here are my expectations for you. And by the way, they may have expectations also. It's very helpful. Here are my expectations for the executive team, for the leadership team. I'm curious what your expectations are of each other and of me. And let's talk about inside of our own company, let's agree together on what are the must wins, mistakes are not acceptable versus kind of where the leeways are. And then how do we really create smart systems, right? You said, oh, it's in my head. I get that. Now it needs to be not in your head, smart systems for efficiently working on, these things so that we do prevent mistakes. And then something there around obviously documenting, because you're going to bring on a lot more people. You're probably going to be 60 by the end of the year if it's going well, maybe even more. So you need to be thinking in the mindset of documentation. And then you want to ask folks, what's your early warning system? When are you going to bring me in? And then you're going to less likely be in, but you're the CEO. You can never abdicate. That's life. You're the founder, right? Yeah. So there are moments where you're going to have a feel of zooming in and zooming out. Like, when am I going to get involved? But then you might want to have your own personal metrics for when do I need to get a little more involved? So that's some good thinking for you, but it's also important communication for your whole team.
Yeah. I find though the people that are attracted to sort of the earlier the earlier startups, they're not necessarily the type that like to document or to put process into place, so I just wonder sometimes of like, is this even the right group of people as you scale, because they kind of resist the documenting and the process building, and they just want to do and then fix and move forward, and that's the exciting part, but then no one wants to document.
Yeah, that you're inventing a thing called startup people, right? Which is like those people, the startup people. I know. And I once was inside of a company and someone said to me, that's big company stuff. And there were 100 people. And I was like, oh, you should go to IBM and see big company stuff, right? So people don't like it. You are correct. You got to hire people for sure who enjoy process, but are not going to be stupid, clunky process people. And unfortunately, some of the people that you have on your team right now are definitely not going to be here by the end of the year or at the IPO party. And I'm sorry about that, but they should go off and find amazing fits for themselves at the early stage, which is where they're best at.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question. And thanks for coming up.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got, thank you, Neha. That's an awesome question. Really appreciate you joining us. I think we have time for one more. Mark Levine, if you're, let me see if I can find you in the gallery here. Yes. Okay, so Alisa, Mark's question was, it's a personal leadership challenge. So we heard a couple of organizational leadership challenges. I thought it'd be fun to take one on the personal dimension as well. Mark said, my leadership challenge is personal. I'm great when focused on tangible client goals, and I'm challenged when setting my own goals.
That's the whole question. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Alisa, it's good to talk to you here in front of so many people.
Right. I appreciate you coming up. Can you give us a little more context? And really, I think it's also helpful if you sort of are asking a question, which is, how can I, or when should I, like, what's sort of a little more context, and then like, what will be powerful for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So what would be powerful for me is to uncover some of the beliefs or the obstacles that get in my way, setting even short-term goals for my business development, hitting a certain level of revenue, and the actions around that. I'm great, and I do leadership coaching, team building, communications training. So I love all those aspects of the business.
Yep.
The other stuff, the business building, writing up a marketing piece, all the emails, the admin, the startup process of business development. Yeah, it's not feeding me in the same way the other parts are.
Yeah, who blames you? I get that.
Exactly. Exactly. At the same time, if I probably am not doing some of the other things, I may not be able to do some of the juicy stuff.
Yep.
So it's managing myself, and when there's a client deadline, great. Very focused. Often I'm kicking in at the last minute,
Yep.
and then it's like all this creativity comes and it's boom. But
Yep.
if I have something that needs to be done daily for a
Yep.
period of time, to chop the wood 200 times we could on the 201st time, it's going to split. That's where I get stuck.
Totally get it. I wish we had an hour just to talk about this in you, but I'm just going to, sort of do a little bit of work here. The obvious answer is you obviously need a virtual assistant or someone or a chief of staff or someone. I'm going to put that aside. Because there's challenges with that too. And also I'm going to take this as a moment of personal growth for you, because we cannot ever outsource all of our tedious tasks. We wish we could, but we can't. Not only that, but even if you're in a VA helping you chop the wood, you still probably have some work to do, some internal work to do on setting kind of accountability to yourself, right? So setting goals and working towards them and achieving them, which are your self goals, not just your client goals. So
Absolutely.
I'm just curious, have you done some of the basics to give yourself some hygiene and some space to set those goals? Have you ever set up a time in your calendar, Thursday, 2 p.m. or Friday morning or something where you're going to approach this task? You've done that. Yeah.
Mhm.
You've done that.
I've set the
What gets in
time.
the way? Great. What gets in the way? Because it's like, okay, now you're doing, you're on this webinar, you're on a webinar. So you obviously know how to keep a calendar. What gets in the way? Do you know specifically what you say to yourself that prevents you from doing that work? What gets in the way?
I think, because I was thinking a little bit about this as we're going through it, I think what gets in my head is it may not work.
Yeah.
It may fail.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably going to be unpleasant in the beginning. It's like starting, if I haven't run in a while and I'm starting to run again, there's going to be a period of time where I'm going to feel it's going to be a struggle. So this beginning part where it's going to feel like a struggle and it may not pay off, so I don't do it.
Right. Got it. Thank you for sharing that so honestly. So you have this, we talked earlier about imposter syndrome, the voices in your head. Great. I honor that. Now you're
Thanks.
a coach. What would you tell that person?
I don't coach people personally because of stuff
Okay.
like this. I coach
So you're a
people
smart,
around leadership issues.
Mark. Wait. You're a smart person, right? And you can help other people. What would you tell that person?
Well, I'd start out by saying, you're right. It may not work.
It may not work. I agree with that. Okay. And
And can you live with that if you put in the effort and it doesn't work? Is that okay? Is that,
interesting. And how do you answer that question for yourself? Is that okay?
Yeah, it would be okay. I'd
Okay.
probably learn something from it, and it might be, and I think the other question is, can you do the unpleasant things? How unpleasant are these things?
Love it. These are great.
It's not going to the dentist.
Not going to the
Every time
dentist. It's also
every time
not
I'm at the
working at
dentist-
IBM.
Right.
Yeah.
These are not,
No one's
They're not
shooting at you, my
physically-
friend.
exactly. They're not physically painful things.
Right.
They're just a
So-
little uncomfortable.
Yeah. And do we have to do sometimes uncomfortable things to be successful in our lives?
Absolutely.
So what can you tell yourself as a little bit of a motto, a little bit of a pep talk as you approach these things?
I think my favorite one is, it's not going to the dentist.
Great.
It's not,
Write
honestly,
that down.
it's not going
Write
to the
that
dentist.
down. Not going to the dentist. I will share with everybody on this call. By the way, Mark, you are not alone. Who wants to chop the wood? So boring. Who wants to send invoices out? It's so boring. I hear you. Here's what it's like, there's a lot of things that we don't feel like doing. What I say to myself is, successful people do what unsuccessful people don't feel like doing. So choose. That's what I say to myself. Everybody's got their own thing. If you want to make this about the dentist, that's great. I love that. Do that. And then my other piece of advice is, set the time in your calendar. And then you need to have a granular thing, right? A granular action. It cannot be write the marketing plan. No.
Yeah.
Write the marketing plan. Who wants to do that? You know this already. It needs to be open the Word doc, maybe find the template that I'll use online. Maybe it's take 5 minutes and run an outline of all the things I want to say. It might be call a friend and together we riff about the marketing document, whatever. That's the next action. And then the last thing, a little treat at the end to reinforce that you can do this and you reward yourself. It's up to you if that's chocolate or not. Again, speaking for myself. Is that helpful?
It is. The other thing I wrote down from this is it'd be interesting to chart my level of discomfort, because it's almost that FDR quote, we have only thing to fear is fear itself. The fear probably feels worse. And if I start to chart the level of discomfort, I'll probably find out, not as bad as I thought.
Yeah. And not only that, Jeremy and I are pretty close with Andrew Huberman, and he talks a lot about dopamine. And that is what the dopamine, function does. You have these little hit of progress, and then it's a motivating molecule. It motivates you to do the next thing. So a little dopamine hit will actually definitely give you a little molecule to motivate.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark, for sharing with us. I know it's something that we can all relate to. Who wants to chop the wood? But I love, Alisa, will you say your line once more for us all? Successful people do.
Successful people do what unsuccessful people don't feel like doing. So you get to pick, do I want to be successful or do I want to be lazy? That's how I frame it.
I think it's beautiful. That's great. Hopefully, Mark, that was useful for you. I want to take just a second, Alisa. We always like to thank our guests. So if folks can turn on their videos, and Alisa, if you can go to gallery view in the top right, you can click on view and then hit gallery. And then I'd like to ask everybody who's here to give Alisa our trademarked fireworks applause. We like to give fireworks applause to all of our guests. Thank you, Alisa, for joining us.